Matthew 13 highlights what I believe to be one of the great dangers in Bible reading when we don't approach it judiciously. And that is, we stop reading when we think we have the answer rather than reading further and allowing the Bible to give us the full answer. Let me show you what I mean. I just did a whole video on parables of Matthew 13. I'll put a link to it in the description. So we're not really going to focus very tightly on the parables today. But what I want you to see is he begins to tell the parable of the sower. We know this parable. You've probably read today, so I'm not going to go over that. The disciples ask him, why do you speak to them in parables? They are obviously seeing that the things Jesus is saying to the people are not being understood. And he gives them this answer. To you it has been granted to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it has not been granted. For whoever has, to him more shall be given, and he will have an abundance. But whoever does not have, even what he has shall be taken away from him. Therefore I speak to them in parables, because while seeing they do not see, and while hearing they do not hear, nor do they understand. He says that they are fulfilling Isaiah, and this would actually be, I'm going to treat this prophecy and this quotation from Isaiah as an additional insight. This is not one of your 3 to 5. The first of your 3 to 5 is what we're talking about in the preceding verses. But he gives this quotation from Isaiah chapter 6, beginning in verse 9, about the conditions that Isaiah was going to be prophesying under, and you can read that for yourself. But Jesus is saying it applied not just to people in Isaiah's generation, it applies to this generation. And he then says in verse 16, but blessed are your eyes because they see, and your ears because they hear. For truly I say to you that many prophets and righteous men desired to see what you see and did not see it, and to hear what you hear and did not hear it. Now, if you stop reading right there and you are approaching the Bible with a Calvinist understanding of the Bible, that there is definite predestination, that God is definitely choosing individuals based on some criteria that we do not understand, or maybe no criteria at all, then it seems like Jesus just said that God is sifting people, basically trying to find the ones that he's always intended to hear the kingdom gospel and filter everybody else out. And if you stop reading right there, that's what you're going to come away with. But when you look at the explanation of the parable, and you look at the explanation not just of the sower, but of the wheat and the tares and the other parables in this passage, what you begin to see is there's a lot more to this answer, but rather it has something to do with the individual. I want you to look at this. So here's the explanation of the parable of the sower. It begins in verse 18. Hear then the parable of the sower. When anyone hears the word of God and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches away what has been sown in their heart. So that's somebody who just hears and doesn't understand. This is the one whom the seed was sown beside the road. Then the one on whom the seed was sown in the rocky place, this is a man who hears the word and immediately receives it with joy. You have to think about it. Jesus has been preaching for a while now. So he's seen all of these interactions. He's seen people that don't understand it. He's seen people that rejoice to hear that they could be part of God's kingdom. Yet he has no firm root in himself. So there's no desire really to serve God. There's no desire really to be changed in that beatitude kind of way to come into the kingdom. If you've got one of those journaling Bibles, I would make a Matthew 5 verses 1 through 12 reference right here. When affliction and persecution arise because of the word, immediately he falls away. Think about the last of the Beatitudes. Blessed are you, or blessed are they who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, right? For theirs is the kingdom of heaven. The one on whom the seed was sown among the thorns, this is a man who hears the word, and the worry of the world and the deceitfulness of wealth choke the word, and it becomes unfruitful. Think back to Matthew 6. Did Jesus talk about the worries of this world and warn about wealth and what wealth could do to your relationship with God? Yes, he did. And the one on whom the seed was sown on the good soil, this is the man who hears the word and understands it. When's the last time Jesus talked about hearing the word? The one who hears and does these things. I'm going to liken him to a wise builder. That the one whom the seed was sown on good soil is the man who hears the word and understands it, who indeed bears fruit and brings forth 100, some 60, and some 30. Jesus is clarifying that statement that he made about why he's teaching in parables, because he's not just laying out a blanket policy. He's trying to draw people that really want to come to God, that really want to conform to those Beatitudes. That is the explanation for why he's talking in parables. The next parable, again, we're not going to read this. I know that you've already read this, that the wheat and the tares is the reverse of the sower. The sower went out to sow, and he was sowing good seed, and it was scattering everywhere. The parable of the wheat and the tares is you've got a good field. You've got a field that's prepared. So he's talking about the people that should have been looking for his coming. And he goes out and he sows good seed. So this is all should be fourth type soil, right? He specifically references the Son of Man sowing the seed here, which is obviously a messianic reference, a reference to Jesus's deity, also a tie back to Daniel 7, that you see that the evil one, which is a euphemism for Satan, even calls him the devil in the next verse, that he goes and sows bad seed in that field. And so he's answering the question in the wheat and the tares with this parable about why everyone in Israel is not saved. It is the seed that is sown in your heart. And so they're the good field. He's put the good seed out, but the problem is Satan is sowing bad seed in that field. And so there's going to be a separation. And what he's preparing them for is that all of Israel is not going to be saved. And it's going to happen at a time of judgment. So there's going to be judgment as to whether or not the people are in the kingdom. And what makes you part of the kingdom is not the blood of Abraham. It's the seed that was sown in your heart. If it's a seed of unrighteousness, then you might look like you're part of the promises of God, but you're really not there. And again, that goes back to that he that has an ear statement. And this is really eye-opening. But we skipped over two parables there that would have helped us understand this a little better. So that's actually point number 2. When we get to point number 3, he tells them this quick parable, and I would put the mustard and the mustard seed and the leaven kind of as the same in point number 3. It says, the kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, which a man took and sowed in his field. And this is smaller than all the seeds, but when it is full grown, it is larger than the garden plants and becomes a tree. So the birds of the air come and nest in its branches. And so he's telling us, it seems insignificant to them, but Jesus is saying it's going to become something that's greater than they could have ever anticipated. And the same is true with the parable of the leaven. All these things, Jesus spoke to the crowds in parables, and he did not speak to them without a parable. And this was to fulfill what was spoken through the prophet. I will open my mouth in parables. I will utter things hidden since the foundation of the world. So this message is something that God has always intended. It was hidden in the promises of Abraham. It was part of them. I mean, you can see it in the promises of Abraham, 2020 hindsight. You can see it in some of the Psalms. You can definitely see it in the book of Isaiah, but it wasn't something that they were wanting to see. The next thing that I want to point out is the similarity between the hidden treasure and the costly pearl. And while they may seem like the same parable, they're really not. So let's talk about this really quickly. So this is point number 4. Here's a guy, he's walking through a field, he finds a treasure, he wants a treasure, he sells everything he has so he can buy the field. Here's a guy who's in a pearl market, he's a pearl merchant, he's looking for fine pearls. He finds one, he sells all that he has so that he can buy this pearl because it's the pearl he's been looking for. Seems like the same story. But really, if you consider that what the two people are doing, it's actually two different stories teaching the same principle. One guy has no expectation. He's cutting through a field. He has no expectation of finding a treasure. He does. It's something that was not promised to him, something he was not told to look for. There is a Gentile reference in there. The second, the pearl merchant, is someone who was supposed to have discernment. Others should have seen this pearl. He's the one that found it. He's the one that is happy because he found it, and he sells all that he has and buys it. And that's why, again, you have the parable of the dragnet, which is very, very similar to the parable of the wheat and the tares. Actually, it's like, but it's kind of the reverse, if you will, of the parable of the mustard seed. So you have this idea of a net being dragged up on the beach. It's filled with all kinds of fish. Some are bad, they get thrown away. Some are good, and they are kept. There's a lot of people that are going to be attracted to the kingdom, but it's only those who have been changed by its message, thinking back to the parable of the sower. And then we're told about Jesus's return to Nazareth. And even though he's done all of these great miracles, we see that they're just questioning his ability. They know his mother Mary, they know his brothers and his sisters are with him. Again, that's a big blow for the perpetual virginity of Mary. They're actually angry at him for the work that he's doing. It's offending them because they think of him as little Jesus that grew up in the village and a carpenter's son. And it says, a prophet is not without honor except in his hometown and in his own household. and he did not do many miracles because of their unbelief. So what we're seeing is that Jesus is pulling back on the miracles he's doing, that where people are wanting to believe and people are searching and are showing their faith, he's doing a lot of miracles. But in places where people are just wanting to see the miracles and then they doubt, he's not going to do a lot. All right. So that's your 3 to 5 insights today from Matthew 13. We didn't go deep into the parables, but I've got other videos where we do that. Hopefully you checked out that commentary by Kyle Pope and you've got the journaling Bibles. I don't think they're going to be on sale too much longer. So if you're thinking about getting one or a set of those, you need to jump on it. But check out the links in the description. Also, if you're a Christian man and you want to grow, join our sister channel, Man Up, the podcast. Join their 12-week, 12-question challenge, and you can be part of that and get your workbook, because the first episode on one of the questions drops this Friday. So till I see you again tomorrow to talk about Matthew 14, have a good day, and God bless.